leader in cutting-edge technology, energy technologies, creating those high-quality jobs right across the country, including in North Wales. And it would be a pleasure to visit creating enterprises with my honourable friend.
Bill Esterson.
My right honourable friend mentioned the exciting opportunities from offshore wind for the people and economy of Wales. Can she tell the House about the discussions that she and her Cabinet colleagues have had with the Crown Estate about maximising the benefits of the opportunity?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The new innovative partnership between Great British Energy and the Crown Estate, we believe, will leverage up to £60 billion of private investment into the UK's drive for energy independence. And I'm delighted that the Crown Estate has today published plans to bring an additional 20 to 30 gigawatts of offshore wind to market by 2030. This is excellent news for Wales's clean energy ambitions, particularly for floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea. And I recently met the Energy Secretary and separately the Crown Estate to discuss how this new industry can deliver jobs and growth across Wales.
Henry Tufnell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Secretary of State set out how Great British Energy will deliver benefits to the Port of Milford Haven and families across my constituency of Mid and South Pembrokeshire?
Secretary of State.
Can I also welcome my honourable friend to his seat? I had the privilege of visiting the Port of Milford Haven energy cluster in Pembrokeshire with my honourable friend and the Deputy Prime Minister in August. I really value the critical role that the port plays in securing the UK's energy supply, and I'm proud that the region is pioneering new green technologies. We've established Great British Energy to drive investments in these technologies, which will deliver sustainable, skilled jobs in Pembrokeshire and across Wales.
Llynys Meddy.
Diolch, Cyfarwydd. Ynys Môn has a long history of clean energy production, but Tory delays over Wilfa have cost the island over 400 jobs since 2010. In March, the now Secretary of State urged the UK government to get on with delivering new nuclear power. Now she's in power, will she back those words with a concrete plan?
Can I welcome the Honourable Lady to her place, and just to say that our manifesto commitment to deliver new nuclear in places like Wilfa stands. We will do that, and this government has now completed purchase of the Wilfa site, as she knows. We will end over a decade of inaction by the previous government on nuclear power as part of our wider plans to get Britain building again.
Secretary John Lamont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by congratulating the new ministers on their appointments. The last Conservative government spearheaded various clean energy schemes for Wales, including the Celtic Freeport, which has the potential to create more than 10,000 green jobs. So will the Minister join with me today in recognising the last Conservative government led the way in delivering clean energy projects for Wales? Does she also recognise that the Welsh Government has to play its part too? And lastly, can the Minister outline what specific discussions she has had with the Welsh Government for their own plans to support clean energy projects in Wales?
Secretary of State.
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for his remarks? My colleague, the Secretary of State for Business and Trade, said immediately following the election that we do not intend to make any changes to the existing Freeport commitments. I'm backing the delivery of the 2 Freeports in Wales, and I'm very pleased that with the involvement of the Welsh Government, we have fair work elements within those Freeports in Wales, which I fully support.
Steve Bitherton.
Number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Under my chairmanship, the Transition Board has moved from discussion to delivery. Last month, I announced £13.5 million for supply chain, skills and employability funds. I also announced our Business and Community Pledge Scheme, bringing together over 50 organisations in support of those workers who are affected.
Steve Bitherton.
I thank the Right Honourable Lady for beginning to deliver funds to support business confidence and provide a safety net for workers. Can she explain how these will support workers in practice who are dealing with great uncertainty?
The 2 funds that have been announced are specifically for people in businesses and people working in the supply chain, because we know that they have already been affected by the uncertainty around the situation at Port Talbot. These will help people to retrain and reskill into new employment, and for the businesses it will help them to diversify and go into new markets if they are the primary customer of Tata Steel.
I think it's grouped as well, Secretary of State, isn't it?
I do apologise, Mr Speaker.
No problem.
So I will answer question 5 as well.
That's great. Jessica Morton.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. And I know my right honourable friend will serve Wales admirably in her new role. Landwells Steelworks in Newport is a key strategic site, manufacturing world-class automotive steel and more. There's so much potential in the site, and I know we all await this statement later, but can the Minister outline what she's been doing alongside the Department of Business to secure future investment in Landwern as part of ongoing discussions with Tata?
Secretary of State.
This government absolutely understands the importance of Llanwern as a key manufacturing facility for steel products. We have worked with Tata Steel UK to ensure that Llanwern is clearly considered in plans for the future of steel in South Wales, and I know that my honourable friend is a dedicated advocate on behalf of the workers at Llanwern and will be closely following the upcoming statement from the Secretary of State for Business.
Secretary of State John Lamb.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Now, today the government is expected to unveil details of its steel plan for South Wales. From what's been briefed to the press, it seems that the core of this new deal is the same deal, worth hundreds of millions of pounds, that was agreed by the last Conservative government. Now, at the time, the Minister and the Welsh Labour Party appeared to rubbish the deal and suggested that a better deal was possible. Does the Minister now regret previous criticism of the deal by the Labour Party?
State.
Mr Speaker, can I say I don't recognise that characterisation of the deal that the Business Secretary will make a statement on later. And I would say that the Business Secretary will make a statement to this House. I don't want to preempt that because we are a party and a government that will always come to this House first to make major announcements. But I am confident that he will set out a sustainable future for steel making in Port Talbot, in Wales and across the UK.
John Lamb.
Well, Mr Speaker, the fact remains that key parts of the deal, as I say, as appears in the press, does appear to be largely unchanged from what was agreed before, including almost £100 million to help steel workers who might lose their jobs. In their negotiations with the last government, Tata Steel were crystal clear no other deal was possible. Moving forward, it's crucial that funding to help retain those who will lose their jobs reaches them swiftly. So can the Minister lay out the detail of how and when the money is going to be sent to those impacted?
Secretary of State.
I'd refer the honourable gentleman to my previous answer. We had the transition board in place for nearly 10 months under the last government. Not a single penny went out of the door to businesses or workers affected. Within weeks of my taking over chairmanship of the transition board, £13.5 million has been released to help supply chain businesses and workers. That is the first tranche of further funds to come.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Green.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. May I welcome the front bench to their places. They will know that the steel industry in Wales is just one of a number that have suffered in recent decades. Last year, the Industrial Communities Alliance said that tackling the effects of deindustrialisation in Wales has been hampered by competitive bidding that forces local authorities in deprived areas to bid against each other, which prevents partnership working and a more strategic approach. So can I ask the Secretary of State to confirm whether future rounds of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund allocated to Wales will no longer be subject to competitive bidding?
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for her question? This government was elected on a manifesto that stressed that a partnership approach with local authorities and an intention to stabilise the funding system moving away from wasteful competition. These are the principles we will seek to apply as we think about the future of local growth funding. And as with all government funding decisions regarding funding beyond March 2025, these are ultimately a matter for the spending review.
Chair of the Select Committee, Ruth Jones.
I'm very grateful. Under the previous government, the Transition Board met 6 times and formed 2 subcommittees, but didn't distribute a single penny of funding that was promised to support businesses and workers in South Wales. So can the Secretary of State provide an assessment of how the Transition Board has changed under her leadership?
Can I congratulate my honourable friend on her election as Chair of the Welsh Affairs Select Committee, and I'm looking forward to engaging with her and her colleagues as they take on their important work. As I set out, we have released £13.5 million. It's the first tranche of funding from the Transition Board, and that has changed it radically from discussion to delivery. That's what we promised, that's what we've delivered.
John Davies.
Question number 3, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Last week, I met with the Transport Secretary to discuss rail infrastructure and steps to improve cross-border connectivity. I also joined Welsh Government Cabinet Secretary Ken Skates to announce a joint Network Rail and Transport for Wales programme which will increase rail capacity by 40%, with 50% more timetabled services on the North Wales main line.
Sean Davies.
Mr Speaker, it's a real delight to see my friend, right honourable friend in her place. The train line from Aberystwyth to Birmingham International via Telford is critical to the university, to the economies and the connectivity of Mid Wales, Telford and wider Shropshire. What conversations has my right honourable friend had with the Welsh Government, Transport for Wales and the Department for Transport here about improving that line and the rolling stock?
I agree with my honourable friend that the Cambrian line provides an important connection to and from Aberystwyth University, and it plays a key role in supporting cross-border connectivity for the people of Mid Wales and beyond. In recent years, Network Rail has undertaken work to improve infrastructure on the Cambrian line to support the introduction of new trains. Enhancements to the railway in Wales that deliver passenger benefits, including proposed electrification, are being considered by the Wales Rail Board.
Liz Savile-Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Lefarydd. I'm sure the Secretary of State will join me in sending every sympathy to the friends and family of the late great singer and comedian Dewi Puss. On the day, cancellations on the North Wales to London line stood at 15.4% in August. We consistently have the highest on-the-day cancellation rates for the entire Avanti network, 3 to 4 times higher than the next worst part of the network. How will she use her role to stop Avanti punishing Welsh travellers?
Can I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her question and concur with her remarks. The Government is clear that performance on Avanti West Coast has not been good enough. We've heard many times in this chamber about the appalling service. Too many cancellations, too many delays. This Government has required Avanti West Coast to improve its performances on services. I discussed this with the Transport Secretary last week. Ministers and officials are holding regular performance reviews with Avanti West Coast and Network Rail to hold them to account, closely monitoring compliance with contractual obligations and driving improvements using the contractual mechanisms.
Liz Savile-Roberts.
Sadly, it seems that between Welsh Government and Labour and Government here in the UK, that service in North Wales is not a priority. We see that in the rate of on-the-day cancellations. But the truth is, of course, that the railways are broken, and Labour's plan fails to address the chronic underfunding that has caused it, particularly in Wales. Now, in 2022, the then Shadow Secretary of State said that it was utterly illogical to designate HS2 as an England and Wales project, and she called on the Conservatives to cough up the billions owed to Wales. Will she cough up now?
We can't go back in time and change the way that project was commissioned, was managed and classified by the previous Conservative government. They need to accept responsibility for the chaos, delay and waste under their watch. But what we can do is work closely with our Senedd and local authority colleagues to develop and invest in transport projects that improve services for passengers right across Wales.
Matthew Patrick.
Question number 4, please, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
I was pleased to meet with the Transport Secretary last week to discuss our approach to rail in Wales. She's reviewing the previous government's transport infrastructure commitments and will report in the autumn. We will deliver rail improvements which will make the services more accountable to the people who use them, through the Passenger Railway Services Bill, which completed its common stages last week, and Great British Railways, launched in shadow form earlier this month.
Matthew Patrick.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and it's great to see my honourable friend in her place. Connections between my constituency of Wirral West and North Wales are many, they're deep and they're valued on both sides of the border. Our transport connections, however, are sadly lagging behind. Could she please set out what conversations she's having with ministers and stakeholders to improve those connections?
Can I welcome my honourable friend to the House and congratulate him? In my meeting with the Transport Secretary last week, we discussed a range of issues, including connections between Wales and Merseyside. I recognise the importance of cross-border travel for people across the region. The UK and Welsh governments are committed to strengthening these connections, which are vital to unlocking economic growth and employment opportunities for people and businesses. And I know rail enhancements are required to improve services on the Wrexham to Bidston line, and I will work across government to drive progress on this.
Torsten Bell.
Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you. Well, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 6 and 10 together. This government's #1 mission is to kickstart economic growth across the United Kingdom. Wales can be at the forefront of this mission with renewable energy, advanced manufacturing, our vibrant creative sector, fintech and the life sciences, each offering huge opportunities to create jobs and drive growth.
Torsten Bell.
Can I thank the Minister for her answer and congratulate her on her appointment. Welsh universities are central to economic growth in many of our communities, but these are difficult times. Swansea University has already seen 200 voluntary redundancies and many more are happening across Wales, and our universities are affected by decisions of the Welsh Government as well as those of the UK Government. So can the Minister update the House on how the two governments will work together to nurture these crucial institutions?
Minister.
I welcome my honourable friend to his place, and I am very sorry to hear of the recent redundancies at Swansea University. The Secretary of State and I met with Professor Paul Boyle, Vice-Chancellor of Swansea University and Chair of Universities Wales, only last week to discuss the challenges facing Welsh institutions and ways of supporting the higher education sector in Wales. We recognise Welsh universities, including Swansea, have a huge contribution to make, both to our mission for growth in the economy and within their local regions. Colleagues at all levels in the UK and Welsh Government are working closely together to safeguard their potential amidst the difficult economic circumstances that we've inherited.
Speaker. Passengers, as has already been said today, passengers on the North Wales coast are being let down by the poor performance in Avanti. This is an issue which is affecting passengers and businesses, hampering economic growth in my constituency of Bangor Economy. Could I ask specifically what discussions the Secretary of State has had with her colleague, the Secretary of State for Transport, on this issue?
Minister.
I welcome my honourable friend to her place, and as she quite rightly says, transport plays an essential role in driving economic growth across Wales. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, met the Transport Secretary last week to discuss rail connectivity, including the performance of Avanti. And as the Secretary of State has set out earlier, the Government is clear that the performance of Avanti West Coast has not been good enough, with too many cancellations and delays. So ministers and officials are now holding regular performance reviews with Avanti West Coast and Network Rail and monitoring Avanti West Coast compliance with its contractual obligations with the aim of securing better services for her constituents.
Colin Lockhart.
Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest contributions to economic growth is the agri-food sector. With today being Back British Farming Day, will the Minister agree with me that farmers, whether they be in Wales or Northern Ireland, need the support of this government to ensure they reach their full potential to contribute to economic growth?
As the member quite rightly says, farmers have a huge contribution both to the economic growth of this country and to our food security, and that is why we are absolutely determined to work hand in hand with Welsh Government to ensure that we can offer the very best to our Welsh farmers.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Question number 8.
Minister.
Thank you. Nuclear energy can play an important role in helping to achieve energy security and clean power, whilst providing thousands of skilled jobs. Great British Nuclear has acquired the Wilver site with a view to developing a new nuclear project. Decisions on the project and the technologies to be deployed at Wilver will be made in due course.
Ashley Fox.
Mr. Speaker, the last government announced the biggest expansion in nuclear power for 70 years. Including the commissioning of Hinkley Point C in Somerset. Does the Minister agree that a new nuclear power plant at Wilver is vital to the UK's energy security, and can she give a timeline for its development?
Minister.
As a previously designated nuclear site, that has hosted nuclear power, Wilva is ideally placed either to be used for large-scale nuclear or indeed to be used for a series of small modular reactors. And we will be setting out our plans on the site in due course.
David Chadwick.
Question number 11, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
This government is committed to improving digital connectivity, as demonstrated by our commitment to full gigabit and national 5G coverage by 2030. I've recently met internet and mobile providers as well as Ofcom. The honourable member will be aware that thanks to the UK government's shared rural network, 4G connectivity has been boosted in his own constituency as a result of the activation last month of 2 additional masts.
David Chadwick.
Many of my constituents living in areas like Llanyrthel and Carnarvon Fawr have been missed out by previous rollout schemes. Is the government committed to ensuring that funding is available to ensure that people living in so-called hard-to-reach areas can be connected?
Well, I very much appreciate the concern that the honourable member has for his constituents, particularly in a rural area which has so many challenges for connectivity. What I can tell him is that in his constituency, over 90% of the premises can access superfast broadband speeds, and to extend gigabit-capable coverage further, approximately 3,000 premises in his constituency are currently expected to receive gigabit-capable connection through Project Gigabit cross-regional procurement framework, and alongside this there are 21 voucher projects across the constituency which include approximately 5,000 premises. But if he concerns, perhaps he could come and see me on the matter.
Jerome Mayo.
Number 30.
Thanks. Jerome Mayo.
Number 13.
Secretary of State, I presume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We recognise that the NHS in Wales faces unique challenges and are committed to working closely with the Welsh Government to improve NHS waiting times. Our approach is grounded in the belief that public services, such as healthcare, should not just be fit for purpose today, but be robust and resilient for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Treating cancer early is absolutely critical for survival rates. In England, the target is to have 85% of patients treated within 62 days. Now, in Wales, that target is more generous. It's just 75%, and yet it has never been achieved. The current rate is an appalling 56.7%, much worse than the equivalent figure in England. So why is it that Welsh Labour is underperforming England? And is it really still the blueprint for government?
Secretary of State.
More people in Wales have been told that they don't have cancer than ever before, and that's good news. Performance increased against the 62-day target for treatment in June compared to the previous month. And over the last 2 years, the number of patients waiting longer than 2 years has reduced. Average waits for treatment remain steady.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Torsten Bell.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This weekend we remembered the late Queen and her enduring legacy of service and devotion to our country. And I was proud to announce a new national monument located at St James's Park to honour her memory. And I know the whole House will join me in sending our best wishes to the Princess of Wales as she completes her treatment. Mr. Speaker, this afternoon we'll introduce the Renters' Rights Bill. After years of inaction, this government will oversee the biggest levelling up of renters' rights in a generation, and I urge the whole House to get behind it. And later this week I'll visit Washington to meet President Biden for a strategic discussion on foreign policy. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in the House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Torsten Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Back in the 1990s, the Conservatives claimed that the minimum wage would cost 1 million jobs. Instead, low earners have seen the fastest pay rises year after year, with no effect on employment. Year after year, which they oppose. Today, and under their watch, 1 million workers are on 0 hours contracts, and over a million people have no sick pay whatsoever, facing risks that nobody in this House would bear. The details matter, but it is outdated nonsense.
Order. Please sit. One, it's easier if you face me, I can hear it better. But the second part is it's meant to be a question, not a statement. No, I decide. Prime Minister, don't I?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Economic growth is our #1 mission, and that's why we forged a new positive relationship with business. But too many people are insecure at work, and that holds them back and holds our economy back. This government was elected to deliver for working people, and that is exactly what we will do.
We come to the Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join with the Prime Minister in his words about Her late Majesty the Queen, but also in his words about the Princess of Wales? She's been in the thoughts of everyone across the country, and I know everyone in the House will be delighted and relieved at the progress that she has made. May I also, Mr. Speaker, take this opportunity to pay tribute to Nicholas Howard. This is his last Prime Minister's questions after supporting 8 consecutive Prime Ministers through these sessions. Never my favourite part of the week, but his commendable service made it far more manageable. Mr. Speaker, yesterday Labour MPs voted to remove the winter fuel payment from over 10 million British pensioners, including those with just £13,000 of income. With that decision debated and made, it is now important that the House understands the full consequences of the government's choice. So can I very specifically ask the Prime Minister, will he now publish the impact assessment before the House rises?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is this. They left a £22 billion black hole. Hid it from the OBR. Richard Hughes is absolutely clear. It's the largest year-ahead overspend outside of the pandemic. Now, of course, when it comes to mitigations and impacts, we put those in place. Ramping up pension credit, dealing with housing benefit and linking it, something the party opposite didn't do for years. And because of the tough decisions that we're making to stabilise the economy, we can make sure that the triple lock shows that increases in pensions will outstrip any loss of payments. But before he complains about us clearing up his mess, perhaps he'd like to apologise for the £22 billion black hole.
Mr. Speaker, this has got... Mr. Speaker.
I want to hear the question.
Mr. Speaker, when I was in government, I delivered record increases in the state pension. We protected the winter fuel payment and we gave pensioners cost of living benefits. He's the one that's taking money away from pensioners on £13,000, Mr. Speaker. But this has got nothing to do with the public finances. His own Chancellor just this morning, his MPs may not have been listening to her, his own Chancellor this morning admitted that she would prefer it if this policy didn't even raise any money, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, the government would not have made this decision without an impact analysis. And yesterday, the Energy Minister confirmed that. So I ask, very simply again, why won't he publish the assessment now?
Mr. Speaker, I remember the days when the Conservative Party was to be concerned about balancing the books. They've left a £22 billion black hole. Responsibility for this decision lies there. The only way to rebuild our country and invest in our public services and make sure everyone is better off is if we clear up their mess and deal with the £22 billion black hole. But, Mr. Speaker, last week we learned that the Shadow Housing Secretary was calling for means testing of winter fuel payments. Now it turns out that the Shadow Paymaster General agrees with her and even boasted about texting his own mother saying she didn't need the payment. Until he apologises for the mess they've created, he's no position to criticise the action that we're taking.
Mr. Speaker, they're shouting now, but those arguments didn't even convince 50 of his own MPs, who suddenly found that they had urgent business elsewhere yesterday, Mr. Speaker. But we know why he's hiding the impact assessment. The Labour Party's own previous analysis claimed that this policy could cause 3,850 deaths. So are the numbers in his impact assessment higher or lower than that?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're taking this decision to stabilise the economy. That means we can commit to the triple lock. By committing to the triple lock, we can make sure that payments of state pension are higher, and therefore there's more money in the pocket of pensioners, notwithstanding the tough action that we need to take. But he goes around pretending that everything's fine. That's the argument he tried in the election. And that's why he's sitting there and we are sitting here.
Mr. Speaker, today pensioners watching will have seen that the Prime Minister has repeatedly refused to admit or to publish the consequences of his decision, and we will continue holding him account for that. But changing topics, Mr. Speaker, today is Back British Farming Day, where we recognise that British farmers produce food that is higher quality, has higher welfare standards and higher environmental standards than imported food. And at a time of increasing global volatility, they are also crucial for our food security and national security. Can he therefore confirm, whether he will be adopting the NFU's recent proposal to enshrine a national food security target in law?
Prime Minister.
Well, food security is really important. I'm glad he's raised that. We have talked to the NFU about this, and rural issues are really important, and that's what we fought the election on, why we've got a lot of rural constituencies sitting behind me now. We'll continue to talk to the NFU. We do take food security very, very seriously.
Rishi Sunak.
I'm not sure I did hear a specific answer, Mr. Speaker, but farmers also do great work to preserve the beauty of the British countryside, and something I'm sure that the Prime Minister will appreciate, given his newfound preference for landscapes over political portraiture. But when it comes to land use, there are currently protections in place to ensure that the most productive farmland is used for food production rather than alternatives like solar. So does he agree that it is not appropriate or right that developers with a vested interest grade the quality of that farmland themselves? And will he look at making that process independent?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, rural communities were neglected under the last government. Confidence was at an all-time low. And thousands of food and farming businesses have been forced out of business. Now, of course, we will work with them. Of course, we'll get the balance right. But we're again picking up, clearing up the mess and rebuilding our country.
Mr. Speaker, as a glimpse, in Wales, the Labour government hammered farmers, hitting them with top-down eco-targets. And Labour's own assessment of those plans said that it would lead to thousands of job losses, less food security and destroy rural incomes, while farmers described it as bleak and damaging. So can he reassure English farmers that he won't threaten their livelihoods, and can he rule out imposing those same top-down targets here?
Prime Minister.
We will work with farmers across the whole of the United Kingdom, as we've made clear, to support them. But here we are. Absolutely clear. No contrition, no responsibility for the economic black hole, the broken NHS, the prison crisis, the ruinous legacy of 14 years of failure. We've started rebuilding the country, renters reform, house building, GB Energy, National Wealth Fund, Border Security Command. I could go on. Whilst they try to rewrite history, we're getting on with building a better country for the future.
Madam Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the whole House will firstly join me in paying our respects to Lieutenant Rodri Lyshan, who tragically passed away last week. My thoughts are with the family, loved ones, HMS Queen Elizabeth crew during this very difficult time. Mr. Speaker, housing in Portsmouth is in dire straits. But local residents in Portsmouth North have valid concerns around population density, infrastructure and the environment. So I'm glad this government is working on delivering affordable housing in the city. Can the Prime Minister ensure that the infrastructure is properly considered and that communities are involved in the planning process for any new developments?
Can I start by saying I'm sure the whole House will want to join me in sending condolences to the family of Lieutenant Lyshan. I agree with her on the desperate need for affordable housing, and that's why we're going to deliver the biggest social and affording housing uplift in a generation. We will get Britain building again 1.5 million houses because the dream of home ownership was snuffed out under the last government.
We now come to the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself and my party with the comments made earlier by the Prime Minister about our amazing late Queen, and also join him in sending our best wishes to Her Royal Highness, Princess of Wales. I don't think anyone could have not been moved by her powerful video, and we hope that she'll make a full and speedy recovery. When it comes to fighting cancer, we know all too well that every day counts. But in the last year of the last government, there were over 100,000 patients waiting more than 2 months just to start their urgent cancer treatment, the worst on record. So will the Prime Minister help boost cancer survival rates by guaranteeing that every patient can start their cancer treatment within 62 days?
Well, I thank him for that question on a really important issue, and there's a report out by Lord Darcy tomorrow which will set out in stark terms the failure in terms of cancer treatment under the last government, which is a really serious issue. This timeline matters, which is why we're taking steps straight away to make sure that we can comply with that timeline, because lives depend on it. And that's why we've already taken a decision to put more scanners in to catch this early and use technology. It's a very serious issue, very serious failure by the last government.
Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for that answer, and also look at the plans that the government is putting forward. Last night, Liberal Democrats voted against the withdrawing of winter fuel payments. We believe it's just wrong to balance the books by removing the support from pensioners. But we do understand that there are some difficult choices to be made to clear up the appalling financial mess left by the last Conservative government. One of the many reasons for that mess was the Conservatives prioritising tax cuts for the big banks, costing £4 billion a year.
They pay more tax.
So will the Prime Minister instead reverse those cuts so that we can afford to support millions of struggling pensioners through this very hard winter?
Well, I'll resist the temptation to get ahead of the budget. But look, what is important is that we recognise that there is this £22 billion black hole that's been left by the previous government. Now, I know that their practice was ignore it, to kick it into long grass. We're taking the tough decisions because I'm absolutely convinced that's the only way we can start rebuilding our country, investing in our public services and making sure that everybody is better off.
Patrick Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My Southport constituency has experienced a difficult summer. Firstly, I want to reiterate that our thoughts are with the families of Alice, Bibi and Elsie, who tragically lost their lives in the attack in July. I welcomed the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary to our town in the weeks that followed, and we worked together to find further ways to bring our community together. Can I therefore ask the Prime Minister to take this opportunity to recommit the government's support for our town for those grieving and affected by the tragic attack?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for that question, and we stand with those who tragically lost their loved ones in this heinous attack. I did go up to Southport the day after and went back actually 3 days after that on a private visit to meet some of the first responders who had been at the scene and simply to say thank you to them. I can't tell the House how angry I was when I got back to London and saw that those same officers who had responded were having things thrown at them by far-right thugs. Mr. Speaker, we will work tirelessly to support his constituents, and I thank him as well for his hard work in this difficult time, working with Sefton Borough Council and Liverpool City Region Combined Authority to deliver a support package. The community has endured this horrendous event should be supported, and I know will be, across the whole House.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yesterday we witnessed some extraordinary celebratory scenes outside Britain's prisons where in some cases serious career criminals were released. And this to make way for, yes, rioters, but equally those who've said unpleasant things on Facebook and elsewhere on social media. Does the Prime Minister understand there is a growing feeling of anger in this country that we are living through two-tier policing and a two-tier justice system?
I'm angry to be put in a position of having to release people who should be in prison because the last government broke the prison system. And the Prime Minister was repeatedly warned. He had his own release scheme. He was repeatedly warned that he had to adopt the scheme that we put in place. The former Justice Minister said if we don't do it, we'll have to get down on our knees and pray. The police chiefs made it absolutely clear in a letter to him before the election that he needed to take action, saying that they wouldn't be able to discharge their duties and saying the risk was loss of an ability to detain suspects. That means, Mr Speaker, an inability to arrest people committing offences. That's how bad it was, and they warned the Leader of the Opposition that further delays until after the general election will increase the risk significantly. What did he do? He delayed and increased the risks.
Sorry,
Mr Speaker. I welcome the Government's swift action to bring railways back into public ownership. Great British Railways will deliver much-needed reform, ensuring the network serves both passengers and rail freight effectively. So can the Prime Minister explain how Labour's ambitious railway plan will also deliver improvements to rail infrastructure to ensure my constituents get the service they deserve at Luton Station?
Prime Minister. Well, I thank her for raising that important matter. One of the first bills that we introduced was to reform our railways after 14 years of chaos. Great British Railways will unite track and train under a single leadership, and that means closer collaboration across the industry and faster, more effective decisions on critical infrastructure. And I know how vital that will be in relation to both Luton and Leagrave stations in her constituency. We're carefully considering the best approach, but I can assure her we're committed to ensuring our railways will be open to everyone.
Tessa Mount. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Today is Back British Farming Day. The previous government let our farmers down and in their incompetence underspent the farming budget by £100 million. Will the Prime Minister deny rumours that his government plans to take advantage of the Conservatives' failure by removing that £100 million permanently? Farmers across the country want to know that the Prime Minister will increase the agriculture budget, as the Lib Dem manifesto proposed, to speed up the rollout of the new environmental land management schemes to support profitable, sustainable and nature-friendly farming.
Well, I thank you for that question. It is a really important issue, and our rural communities were neglected by the previous government, and that's why confidence is at an all-time low. And what we will do is to protect farmers from being undercut in trade deals, make the supply chain work more fairly, and prevent shock rises in bills by switching to GB energy. We won't preempt the budget in relation to this, but we will put the support in place. Thank you.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Many of my constituents, including those at Chapel Gate, have told me about the so-called management agents who charge them rip-off service fees and then fail to provide even the most basic of maintenance. Many of them spend hours each week battling with these agents just to ensure that they and their neighbours are not fleeced in their own homes. Will the Prime Minister recommit this government to act where the previous government failed to reform the leasehold system, which is archaic, outdated and feudal?
Prime Minister. Well, can I first welcome the first ever Labour MP for Basingstoke? And yes, we will reiterate our commitment to act to bring the feudal leasehold system to an end and ensure leaseholders can benefit from more rights, power and protections over their homes.
Brendan O'Hara.
Mr Speaker, international law is clear. Dropping £2,000 bombs on densely populated civilian areas is a crime. And it's beyond dispute that Israel has used F-35s to do exactly that. Yet the government has chosen to exempt F-35 components from the arms licence suspension, when all it had to do was say that Israel could not be the end user if UK manufactured parts were included. Last week, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister stood at that dispatch box and he said, we either comply with international law or we do not.
That's right.
Why has he chosen not to?
Prime Minister.
We are complying with international law. We've set out our reasoning, and I think all fair-minded members of the House would support the decision that we've taken. The most important thing now is that we get a ceasefire in place. That is one of the topics that I'll be discussing on Friday, to ensure that the remaining hostages can come out, that aid that's desperately needed can go in, and we can start the process to a two-state solution, which is the only way to lasting peace.
Graham Dardy.
Fife has a proud defence heritage, and in my constituency of Dunfermline and Dollar, that continues with the dockyard at Rosyth constructing Type 31 frigates for the Royal Navy, along with a local supply chain of local SMEs. So will the Prime Minister ensure the Strategic Defence Review team visits areas of strategic importance such as Fife, so they can engage fully with the local supply chain and ensure the SDSR supports Britain's security as well as local economies?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for that question and for championing his constituency, including the work at Rosyth Dockyard. The Strategic Defence Review will ensure that defence is central both to security and to economic growth and prosperity. The review will consult widely, including across the devolved nations, and I know the reviewers recognise the strategic importance of constituencies like his, and I will ensure that he gets the chance to meet the relevant minister to discuss the particular issues in his constituency.
Dr Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The previous Conservative government committed to a rebuild of Whipps Cross Hospital, the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Harlow, and the establishment of a new community.
You have to sit down a minute. Look, I'm determined to hear this question. I don't expect the front bench to be shouting me down, and it won't happen.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The previous Conservative government...
Trying to join in again?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The previous Conservative government committed to a rebuild of Whipps Cross Hospital, the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Harlow, and the establishment of a new community diagnostic centre at St Margaret's Hospital in Epping. Will the new Labour government honour these commitments and progress these projects in full, which are so vital to improving the health services needed by my constituents of Epping Forest? And if it helps the Prime Minister at all with his answer, these services will also help some of the constituents of his Health Secretary just next door in Ilford North.
Prime Minister.
Well, look, he's right to champion the hospitals in his constituency, quite right to do so. The problem with what the last government promised was this. They promised 40 new hospitals. The problem was there weren't 40, they weren't new, and many of them weren't hospitals. So we need to review what we can do and put it on a sustainable, deliverable basis. But we will, and he's right to champion those in his constituency.
Or are being built.
And Lise Bidgley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last week, I met my constituent, Cheryl Corbell, mother of Olivia Pratt Corbell, the 9-year-old tragically murdered in 2022. Cheryl is campaigning for Olivia's Law, which would compel convicted criminals to attend court and face the judge and receive their sentence. Will my right honourable friend commit to supporting Olivia's Law and meet Cheryl to discuss how we can move this forward without delay?
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, in the King's Speech, we confirmed that we intend to introduce legislation this session so courts have the power to order the most serious offenders to attend their sentencing hearings. This is really important, and I know it's felt across the House, because to deprive victims and their families of seeing the sentencing exercise is to deprive them of justice. I will meet Cheryl. I have already met Cheryl and gave her the commitment last August that we would do this, and I repeat it again today, and I would just pay tribute to the campaign that she has led.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. If the Prime Minister was a pensioner earning $11,350 this year and receiving no winter fuel payment, what would he prioritise this Christmas? Heating or eating?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have to be clear why this decision is being made. A £22 billion black hole. And the previous government would walk past these tough decisions, pretend it wasn't there, put it in the long grass. We're not prepared to do that. Because we're taking tough decisions, we can commit to the triple lock, and that means that the state pension will increase by more than any loss of the winter payment allowance. But I would just say this. The biggest impact on pensioners in recent years was when they lost control of inflation, when they allowed energy prices to go through the roof, and we went through a cost of living crisis. We're stabilising the economy to make sure pensioners never, ever have to live through that again.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Annabelle is 5 years old and lives in my constituency. She has high-risk neuroblastoma. Annabelle has endured 15 months of chemotherapy, high-dose chemotherapy, stem cell harvest, proton therapy, immunotherapy, hair loss, nasal feeding. Now she urgently needs the drug DFMO, not yet available in the UK. It must be administered within 90 days of the end of immunotherapy. 91 days is too late. Will the Prime Minister please meet with Annabelle's parents to discuss the life-saving care that she needs?
Prime Minister.
Can I pay tribute to Annabelle for her incredible bravery and understand how important it is that cancer patients are able to benefit from rapid access to effective new treatments. The manufacturers of this drug have applied for a UK licence through Project Orbis, which allows the rapid review and approval of new cancer treatments. And we'll ensure that process is completed as quickly as possible. And I will also ensure that the Health Minister does set up the meeting that he's asked for.
Dame Harriet Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought that socialism was about taxing those with the broadest shoulders in order to help the most vulnerable. But it appears that Starmer socialism involves scaring those with the broadest shoulders out of the country while taking away the winter fuel allowance of frail 90-year-olds living in drafty homes. Will the Prime Minister apologise to my shivering constituents for his personal choice? And will he reverse this chilling decision?
My choice is to stabilise the economy after 14 years of failure. And I'll tell you for why. Because when a government loses control of the economy, it's working people who pay the price, and I will not let that happen under a Labour government.
Paulette Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More than half of people with pancreatic cancer die within 3 months of diagnosis, and 7 in 10 people never even receive treatment. Every 2 minutes in the UK, someone is diagnosed with cancer. But for those diagnosed with the least survivable cancer, time has too often already run out. I'm really proud of the Labour government's commitment to our NHS, but will the Prime Minister now commit to reviewing a long-term cancer strategy so we can improve diagnosis and treatment rates in this country?
Prime Minister.
I thank her for raising this important issue, and it's obviously the second time it's been raised in this session. I'll have a lot more to say tomorrow when I deal with Lord Darcy's report. I pay tribute to her tireless campaigning, particularly in relation to pancreatic cancer. Cancer patients have been failed by the last government, waiting far too long for diagnosis and treatment. We'll get the NHS catching cancer on time, diagnosing it earlier and treating it faster, so more patients survive this horrible set of diseases.
Louis Fletch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Following Labour's disgraceful political decision to scrap winter fuel payments with little notice to millions of pensioners, will the Prime Minister today rule out scrapping concessionary travel fares and council tax discounts, which also help millions of pensioners across the UK? Yes or no?
Prime Minister.
Well, as he knows very well, I'm not going to preempt the budget. It will all be set out in due course.
Gareth Emerson.
Speaker,
Can I pass on the heartfelt thanks on behalf of the Bolton Council of Mosques, who greatly appreciated the dedication and leadership that the Prime Minister showed during the recent riots over the summer. Yeah. Does my right honourable friend agree with me on the importance of supporting interfaith and community groups who play a vital role in bringing people together?
Yeah. Minister.
Well, I thank her for raising that. And we owe an incredible debt of gratitude to our police for their courage in dealing with the recent disorders. And we took action to ensure they had the resources and powers they needed to tackle violence and restore order to our streets. We also, Mr. Speaker, provided additional security for mosques, ensuring freedom of worship and protection from racist threats. And in the aftermath, we saw communities who really represent Britain coming forward, led by faith groups and community organisations. They showed that unity and demonstrated our values of tolerance and of respect.
Anne Davies.
Diolch Llefarydd. Denmark has been undergrounding its electricity cables since 2008, building infrastructure and maintaining responsible stewardship of the countryside. The Welsh Labour government's policy is for all new power lines to be placed underground where possible. The UK Labour government favours overhead pylons. Why is his government opposing Welsh colleagues in Wales?
We are absolutely committed to the transition to renewable energy. The reason for that is because it gives us energy independence, it lowers the bills, and of course the next generation of jobs are tied up with it. We have to do it in a cost-effective way, and we'll make those decisions in the cost-effective way.
Jessica Morton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK steel industry needs a serious government which works in partnership with both businesses and trade unions to secure a transition that's both right for the workforce and delivers economic growth in Wales. We know that deindustrialisation can be devastating to communities, so can the Prime Minister tell me how the government's safeguarding jobs and securing the future of steelmaking communities like ours for generations to come?
Prime Minister.
We're taking every step we can in relation to the steel industry because it's vital that we give it the support that it needs. We need steel in this country, we need steel made in this country, and our plans and our missions mean we're going to need more steel, not less. And it's the duty of the government to ensure jobs and communities and people aren't ignored in the transition and that jobs are protected. And Mr. Speaker, I can say the Business Secretary will provide an update to the House this afternoon.
Olivia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oxfordshire has seen a huge amount of population growth in recent years without the infrastructure to match.
Why is that?
A new railway station on the Great Western Main Line between Didcot and Swindon, Grove and Wantage, would help to reduce traffic and improve access to both Oxford and London. Does the Prime Minister support investment in our railway, and would he meet with me to hear the case for a new railway station at Grove and Wantage?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable member for raising this important issue, obviously very important for his constituents. And we are committed to putting